Welcome. I'll just cut you guys off and start with the presentation. My name is Michael Joffe. I'm a public cloud architect for Barracuda Networks. I've recently started for the company. I have a history in network security, so working for vendors, integrators, internet providers, and consultancy firms in different enterprises, financials, and mostly on-premise security. But we're going to talk about cloud security, or specifically security in the cloud era, which is Barracuda Network's specialty. Actually, we're leaders in this field in Azure as well. We're the premium partners, or whatever the exact notation is. Let's see. When talking about security in the cloud, we're speaking of securing workloads. We're talking about workloads, whatever web servers or applications or developers' platforms you're planning on landing in the cloud or moving to the cloud. There's obviously a connectivity issue showing up, and it needs to be secured and well handled. In order to show you what the state of the cloud is at this moment, I'll just start with a survey we've commissioned. Not even half a year, I think May, June it was. A survey among 1,300 companies all across the world, with 550 in EMEA. So large enterprises mostly, 500 to 10,000 people, employees in different branches: IT, retail, manufacturing, business, financial services, energy and oil, obviously very broad audience. And we've asked them whether they're currently active in the cloud, and 35% of them are actually deploying workloads in the cloud as we speak. In 2 years' time, 50% more or less, and in 5 years' time, 62%. So it's got a nice linear increase, linear growth. The cloud is getting more and more popular. The adoption in Belgium and the Netherlands is very high, because those countries are known to be tech savvy or into new technology and leading in that way. Surprisingly, maybe the UK and Germany and France they're all at the bottom of this, but they're larger countries and they're big markets for both Azure and Barracuda Networks. So maybe the percentage is not displaying their relevance, but they're very big markets for us. Or maybe it's the survey that displayed this, exaggerated that stat. So what is the cloud used for, the public cloud? Mostly data storage and data recovery. So there's a focus on data, and also on websites, application hosting, data analytics, business intelligence, etc., etc. You've probably heard other speakers about that. This data has a lot of sensitive data, obviously. 48% personal data, employees' data, 42% business intellectual property, bank details, and as you know, I just heard someone talk about GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. They will be enforced in May 2018. What that means is that not only will you have a lot of issues with your customers or reputation loss when you're being hacked, but you'll also be fined when you haven't met the necessary precautions in order to guarantee that your data is secure. I don't know exactly, but probably I'll find out. Good question. I'm being bombarded about the GDPR, so I didn't really bother who's going to fine these people. I just know that they'll be fined. Yeah, but what's very relevant here is that there are platform misconceptions, and that means that the users, the customers, the people that move their workloads to the cloud, they think that the platform provider, Azure or AWS, Google, whatever, we'll focus on Azure obviously, they think that they secure the cloud and that everything is all safe and sound, but The cloud provider is actually protecting the cloud itself, not what's landing in the cloud. So there are a lot of policies and regulations that companies need to take care of on their own in order to make sure that what they're landing in the cloud is secure. And that's where Barracuda comes in, as they're one of these third parties that can help customers to secure their end of the deal. For example, if Azure is being DDoSed, obviously that's Azure's responsibility. But when a specific application is being DDoSed, then there's a gray area there, but sometimes you're out of luck. You need to take care of that on your own. And this is directly related. Do these enterprises understand their responsibility? And 61% claim that they do. Even if they're right, that's just a little over half of them know what their responsibility is and what Azure is taking care of. It's evenly matched across countries. And more specifically, for example, 64% of the interrogated or companies that took part in the survey think that the customer data in the public cloud is being secured by the platform provider, which is not the case. Application in the cloud, 61%. Operating system, so patching and everything. Obviously, if you deploy a new virtual machine, for example, you will deploy the latest patched virtual machine. But if you have one running for 5 years and you've never patched it, well, then you've never patched it. It's not that Azure will tell you, well, there might be some automatic system that will alert you that you need to patch. I wouldn't know that. But you're responsible for patching your own VMs. It's just an example, obviously. So the worry, or sometimes people call it paranoia, but the worry is there. People are aware of the risks. Maybe it's exaggerated, or at least they know something needs to be done when moving workloads to the cloud, as 60% of the enterprises have been attacked already, and 26% are convinced that it will happen again. These figures right here are not really correct at this moment. I mean, they're correct based on the survey, but with all the latest outbreaks and hacks in the media that were known in the media, the fear of all these attacks are much higher at this point, even if the survey has been led in May or June. So this is stalling 2 out of 3 projects of rolling out workloads in the cloud. The precautions, what precautions have been taken? So I'm not going to go into detail everywhere. I'm trying to go through the slides, these survey slides, as quickly as possible and not give you the death by PowerPoint vibe. And obviously this will be available on the website, on the TechDays website, so you can simply read it, download it, etc. But the important thing to notice is that over half of the organizations have invested in additional security products. So additional as in on top of what Azure is providing, like a third-party provider like Barracuda. And 37% plan to do so in the future. So there's still a lot of work to do, but people are conscious of the fact that that it's there. A typical overview of all kinds of scans that constantly happen, hacks on the public cloud. It's a bit of a well, slide is a bit threat based. Obviously you have connectivity that needs to take place, high priority, low priority. Some of it has to be blocked, and at the same time, while you're working with your workloads in the cloud, there are all these scans or attacks that take place or can take place. So this is maybe a bit of an overload on that whole threat discussion, but at least all the organizations agree on the benefits of the cloud. I mean, all of them. 99%, I guess 1% didn't understand the question or forgot to fill in the form. But the scalability, the maintenance, less maintenance, the cost reduction, I suppose that other speakers at TechDays have gone into great depths about all the advantages of Azure, so I won't get into that, but it's a great product. It's what got me into this whole public cloud thing. For me, this is the essential slide of the whole presentation, as it shows you this shared responsibility model that I mentioned. So the public cloud vendor is taking care of the cloud security, and the customers, the users of the cloud services, they're the ones who control the security in the cloud. I have a good example on this. I've spent most of this year in deploying an Azure instance at a big bank in the Netherlands, and most of the time was spent on discussing regulations, setting up security controls, building a security framework in order to be able to land workloads in the cloud. So what does that mean? It means that whatever you want to do in the cloud needs a certain amount of building blocks, security building blocks. So for example, if you want to simply deploy a VM in the cloud in a sandbox environment that has no customer data, you just want to allow someone to experience what Azure is about and just play around with it, that has no risk, basically. There's no sensitive data, there's no worries, basically. So you need a minimum amount of security building blocks. So that implies, for example, an antivirus, that the OS is patched, that access control, I'm not sure if that's even necessary for that situation. No firewall filtering is necessary in that situation, but as soon as you start working with corporate data, sensitive data, or for example, a developer's platform who is there for obviously developers to build code for different applications within the organization, you want that locked up well, and that's where you need a third party like Barracuda. And this is our portfolio where we're focusing on. I'll start with the least important one, I would say. The email security gateway. This is basically a VM version of our on-premise email security gateway solution. And people are used to that. They also purchase the VM version if they need it. And what is popular, though, is our SaaS version of the same product, which is called Barracuda Essentials, which is, well, much more popular lately, as it doesn't, as people don't have to manage it, they don't have to install it, they just use the service, they just pay for the service, and they're done. So my main focus is the web application firewall and the next-gen firewall. So web application firewall for securing your web servers, and next-gen firewall for security and connectivity issues, connectivity setups. I need a... EOS, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's all EOS. It's basically you deploy them in Marketplace, and yeah, you configure them.
No, what I mean is not the underlying infrastructure where it runs on, but what is it protecting? Can it protect your password load
Oh yeah,
as
yeah,
well as your ES?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That doesn't matter. It's basically an application you put in front of your workloads in order to filter or block or inspect. So I'll start with the web application firewall. Let me just deploy everything. Yeah. So we inspect inbound and outbound traffic. Inbound traffic is this is the web app, so it's towards and from web servers. We're able to protect against the top 10 OWASP attacks. Like I mentioned earlier, the application DDoS function. We're handling that. What is nice as well is the proactive defense. Application cloaking, that means that, for example, if someone wants to hack into a web server, it's always it's pretty evident that you need to know what you're attacking. So during that first initial scan, there's a reconnaissance phase where malicious intended people try to figure out what you're actually running in order to attack it. And with application cloaking, we're hiding what you're actually using, so it's not being seen to the outside world. GeoIP is all about correlating data based on previous traffic. So if your customer base, for example, is mainly focused in the Netherlands and suddenly you have a high peak out of South America or Australia, then it gets suspicious, blocked, and obviously we have logging and reporting in order to really see what's going on. So the user, the admin who's configuring this is fully in control of what's going on. We also work together with, we integrate well with Azure Security Center and OMS, the monitoring system within Azure. We also work together with Splunk and ArcSight, for example. So that is all. If you have an existing infrastructure of logging, monitoring, etc., we can integrate with that. We work together with that, and we have great partnerships. So in order to deliver the best product possible. Data loss prevention, that's for outbound traffic. For example, if well, we're scanning, decrypting the traffic, and if we see, for example, credit card numbers, we will replace all the first digits with stars, for example, and only leave the last 4 and let that traffic go out. That's, well, one of the things, obviously, BSN numbers, social security numbers will also get that same treatment. And another feature we have is that we can authenticate the inbound traffic, for example. So we can force authentication through Active Directory, for example. That's most of the overview. So the most common use cases, as I mentioned, application security, so DDoS, cross-site scripting, protection, integration with Azure AD, ADFS protection. That's, for example, if you have an Active Directory server and you're afraid of being DDoSed, then you can place the WAF in front of it and it will pre-authenticate, and therefore if you're getting DDoSed, it will catch up that traffic and drop it, obviously, and your Active Directory will not go down. Load balancing, layer 7 load balancing, and we're able to route traffic as well on all kinds of variables, not just source and destination and IP, but also on content. And data loss prevention is inspecting traffic for sensitive data. This is a typical high-level design for a web application firewall deployment in Azure, with a load balancer in front in order to have the high availability set up. I put 4 nodes in there in order to show you that it's auto-scaling. So obviously you can have 1, you can have 2 for a cluster, and depending on the dynamics of what you're deploying in Azure, then obviously you can also deploy, need not deploy, but auto-scale the web application firewall tier. What else can I add about this? Pretty much it. The next-gen firewall, what's our other main focus? We offer VPN connectivity, site-to-site. So what you're used to from the on-premise world, basic IPsec, and we also have a proprietary protocol called TINA, which I'll get into later on. The multi-tier architecture, we're able to segregate within a VNet in Azure, because as you know, Azure doesn't have VLANs, it's all layer 3, and there's some challenges in making a good separation of all the subnets within a VNet. ExpressRoute, we offer more visibility in ExpressRoute thanks to that aforementioned VPN protocol called TINA. Just to introduce it, we offer up to 24 transports within one tunnel. So we can build more than one VPN tunnel with the same remote gateway, which means that you can also have failovers to other tunnels, or you can fully apply quality of service based on several configuration items, not just source, destination, and service, but also application, URL. And since our last release, also based on the load. So if you're afraid that you don't have enough bandwidth for a specific connection, you can make sure that it auto scales and make sure that there's no delay, basically no lagging in this traffic. I'll have a use case, a customer use case about this later on. Traffic control, so IDP functionality, antivirus, web filtering, that, and access to resources. So we also offer site-to-client VPNs and SSL VPN, and we're the only firewall product in Azure that offers SSL VPN. Client-to-site VPN, obviously, we have our own VPN client as well, called CUDA Launch. Customer use cases. First example is agriculture services. It's a company in the Netherlands with, it's a quite large enterprise, as you can see, 15,000 employees. And to make things simple, among others, what they're doing is that, for example, if a farmer needs more seeds or something, they can just, instead of going through the old logistics, they can simply grab a mobile device and order more seeds, and it will be delivered, and etc. So there are different challenges, as there are different services to deploy in Azure in different zones, and with different, the workloads had different levels of risk. People from both inside the office and outside the office need to connect to it, and they need visibility and centralized control. I didn't touch upon that topic yet, but we also have, well, first of all, we have a graphical interface to manage the firewall, but we also fully integrate with Azure. So you can also deploy ARM templates and manage everything through code, or ARM templates or code, or just without using the graphical interface for configuration, just for monitoring. Or you can use OMS and Azure Security Center to look at monitoring. So you're not dependent of this managing tool, unless you're from the network security angle. Let's say if you're not a developer, you're used to having a graphical interface to manage your firewall. So it's similar to what people are used to from other vendors. They all kind of look the same. They're a bit different, but you'll manage. And we also have a central management station if things get out of hand. So if you have, for example, more than 5 firewall clusters, it makes sense to have a central manager in order to, for example, automatically deploy configurations or auto-scale, have a better overview of the whole if it becomes too crazy. For example, we have the Postbank in Germany as a customer, which has almost, I don't know, more than 2,000 firewalls managed by one command center. And basically that's because they have one next-gen firewall behind each PIN machine. And obviously a lot of the configs are the same, so the deployment is very static, I would say. So a central manager helps with that. So the outcome of this case study is that we deployed a next-gen firewall in to secure the headquarters communication, and there's one to separate the zones, and a DMZ is also created in Azure. You're missing out on this. This is our reference design. Typical design where obviously you have the office connecting to Azure or separate users, whether they're from within the company or external users. A separate firewall tier. Let me just go on with that. Yeah. If a customer is trying to access a web server in the red tier, for example, they would first go through the web application firewall, and then the traffic goes back to the next-gen firewall, is being filtered, and will arrive or not in the red tier. Obviously, thanks to user-defined routing, we're not able to send traffic in between all these tiers, all these subnets. Everything has to pass through the next-gen firewall in order to go in or out, or intra-zone traffic. That's pretty much it for this design. We're also offering stateful failover. We're the first ones and only ones, if I'm not mistaken, to offer stateful failovers. High availability is quite a challenge in Azure. If you don't have layer 2 as a definition, then you need to figure out how to do it. And Barracuda found a way, as we're actually the first application. The web application firewall was the first application in Azure to be certified, aside from, for example, Windows and a few Linux distributions. And the next-gen firewall also is very mature. It's specifically developed for Azure, and obviously the version for AWS was specifically designed for AWS. It's not just a VM just ported in the cloud. The second use case, I have 3 in total, so we're almost there. The second use case is a healthcare insurance company, a big one in Holland as well. What they wanted to do is they needed to develop some applications, and they hired external staff in order to do that. So they wanted the external staff to connect to Azure, use the tools in Azure, and that's pretty much it. So there's obviously the remote desktop connection that needs attention, and also they were concerned about outbound traffic, that they only use the tools that are allowed by the company, not that they, for example, like to use certain tool because that they're used to it, but it's not really regulated or patched or unknown. They want to avoid people from using other tools than are authorized. And yeah. So the deployment was one next-gen firewall that filtered the outbound traffic. Publishing for remote desktop services were being handled by web application firewall, and traffic inspection was taking place. And the high-level design is different than the previous one. This is actually pretty much the same as the reference design that I just discussed previously, but we have an access layer and a data layer. And they did that because if there was any breach or any possible threat, they have a separation which is linked with a VPN tunnel with the TINA protocol, and they can just shut it down whenever they want to, and don't risk having their data exposed by anyone. Obviously, the external users are just connecting to this part and then being looped over here. The red link over there is just a management connection from on-premise, so there's no other traffic going through there except from the knock socks, just checking the traffic. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The TINA protocol is the only one that can link different VNets or also different cloud providers. We can link, for example, with if you have some workloads in Azure and some in AWS, you can link them with the TINA protocol. You can't set up an IPsec tunnel in order to pass that. And finally, this example is a gaming company in France, which had a few challenges. For Euro 2016, they expected a lot of traffic, and they didn't want to invest into hardware. They didn't want to buy loads of servers, deploy them, and after Euro 2016, just be stuck with metal and plastic. So that's why they wanted to move to the public cloud, to Azure. But obviously, there were some compliance reasons. So the databases needed to remain in-house, the database services, sorry. So there needed to be a connection between the public cloud and on-premise situation, and needed to be accelerated, encrypted, and prioritized. Yeah. So we deployed a next-gen firewall in Azure, and also a next-gen firewall in the data center, and used that TINA protocol over an ExpressRoute. So the design looks a bit like this, to simplify things. Obviously, they already had routers and a firewall complex in place in the data center. So the next-gen firewall in the data center is just being used as a VPN concentrator. It could be a hardware device. It could be a VM. That's relevant. The functionality is the same in this case. And we're setting up a tunnel with the next-gen firewall in the cloud in Azure. Like I said earlier, there are 24 transports possible. So if, for example, you have backups running, if the backups have like a delay of 5 minutes or whatever, it's not that big of a problem. So you might want to use the tunnel over the internet connection for just backups, but the feed for the customers, all the online games that they're playing, you want to prioritize that. You want to make sure that there is no delays, no lags, no latency is the word I was looking for. So yeah, it adds quality of service in ExpressRoute. That's basically the biggest advantage, and also the failover possibilities. That pretty much rounds it up. Information-wise, we have videos on our website. We have free webinars on our website if you want to attend more specific matters and actually ask questions about this material. There are technical briefs, white papers, admin guides, that kind of stuff. You can contact cloud_support at barracuda.com for any questions. You can start a 30-day trial in Azure Marketplace, and currently it's extended to 90 days if I'm not mistaken. So for 3 months you can play around with the next-gen firewall and web application firewall and see how it works out for you. You can also ask for a demo, a WebEx session, for example, or like a proof of concept in your Azure environment, also via WebEx or one of our partner resellers, or we can obviously also show up in person. That's not a big deal. And that would be it. I would like to thank you for sticking along, because I know people are running towards the train. Yesterday people weren't leaving as quickly as I was presenting earlier, or maybe I'm more boring today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or we have a booth downstairs where you can also ask questions. I also have a colleague downstairs who is also a public cloud architect with more experience, as I just started this month, but I have about a year of experience with Barracuda and more with Azure. But she's an experienced colleague of mine, so if I can't answer your questions, I'm sure she will be able to answer all of them. And that's about it.